Perfect, perfect. So let's start with today's session then. Uh, Last week we covered a few of the basic things like some variables and some stuff. So here's a quick revision of what we covered last week. Who can tell us what's a variable, what's a conditional, and what's a loop? Quickly, like in one sentence, each of them.
So a variable is like a container to hold values. A conditional is checking whether the condition is true and false and do accordingly whatever we want it to do, and the loop is to repeat something.
Absolutely. So to see an example of a variable, we can say person is equal to, and then put anything we want to store in that, and that would be a variable. We can store integer variables, we can store strings, we can store arrays, lists. We will see more data types later in the course, but essentially we can store whatever we want into a variable. Most of the time we will be working with integer variables, so or float variables, so we will have just numbers or numbers with floating point numbers like 15.5 or something with decimal points included in them. If you want to see the type of a variable, the way you can check is by putting type and then the name of the variable. So go ahead, try that in your browser, open your Colab notebooks, create a variable named person, give it any value you want, and then try type of that variable and let me know what answer do you get.
So where do we go?
You
We go
go
to
to
Colab and we
Colab.
create a text,
Yeah, you
new code
create a
plus.
exactly like this. You go to Colab, you create a block, you write person is equal to something, and then you write exactly the second thing, type of person.
And then we play it, right?
Yeah, then you play it.
So it's saying str.
Str is short for string. So the data
Okay.
type of this particular variable is string.
So we didn't tell it what data type it is. It assumed itself because of
Yeah,
the
it
value that we put in it.
automatically knows it from the value of it. That's the thing with Python. We don't need to explicitly declare our data
Okay.
types like C++ or like some other uh, programming languages. We don't need to declare what type of variable we are creating. Based on the value that we assign to that variable, it's automatically gonna know what's the type of this variable. For example, if I just write person is equal to 1, if I just give it a number, store that in the person, and then I write type of person again, I will get a different variable data type. So go ahead, try that in your browsers
It
and
says
see.
int.
Yeah, which
So
is short
basically
for
changes it to
integer.
integer. Okay, got it. So it's a lot more flexible than normal languages.
Yeah, it's much easier. That's why it's very popular because you need to write shorter and shorter code to accomplish
Mhm.
more and more tasks. So it simplifies things quite a lot. So now go ahead, change that to maybe 1.0. There's a difference in Python between 1 and 1.0. When
Float.
you
Okay.
write it explicitly as 1.0, you will get a different data type.
It's saying float.
It's saying float. So because 1 in Python, when you write it as just 1 without any decimal point, that's an integer. But if you write it only as 1 point, not even 0, as soon as you add that point, it becomes float in Python. Did everybody get the same answer? Float for 1.0.
Yes.
Perfect. So now you know the difference between different data types in Python. We have strings, integers, floats. So the way you create a variable defines its type. Let's go ahead and create some more information that we want to store in these particular variables. I have created here, you can just watch, you don't have to redo this step. Device is equal to iPad. What's the data type of device here? This variable device. And you
String.
can see it exactly. It's a string, and you can see it when you hover your mouse pointer over a variable. Once you've run a block and it's stored, then you can hover your mouse over it to see the type as well as value of it. So on my screen, you can see that it's a string and
Okay, but to
the
me it's
value is
showing
iPad.
literal for some reason.
You may have written without the inverted colons.
No, no, I did write inverted colon. Uh,
Device is equal to iPad with double inverted.
yeah, yeah, that's what I wrote. I don't know why it's saying literal.
Can you type what you typed in the chat and I will take a look? Exactly what you
Oh,
typed.
yeah, I just copy pasted.
Device is equal to iPad. Model is equal to. Did you check type of device or model?
No, no, I'm just hovering on device, so
Oh,
it's
okay.
saying literal.
Uh, did you
Right,
run the
it's saying
block?
variable,
Okay.
variable device literal iPad in square brackets. That's what it's showing in the tooltip when I
We
hover
will
on
take a
device in the
look at it later, but can you quickly type the same previous command? Type device and see
device.
what does it give you there,
It's saying string
because it's
str.
a string. So
Yeah.
this one would be in that case more reliable. You might have some either some bugs or something. I don't know. I would have to take a deeper look into the reason why it's saying literal there, because it shouldn't be. It should be showing you the correct data type. The only reason I can think of is maybe
Oh,
you're
okay,
looking
got
at
it.
it before
So
running.
after I ran it, now it's showing string in the tooltip
Exactly,
also. So yeah,
because
I think.
there's something called IntelliSense or something in Python,
Mhm.
in Colab editor, in Colab as well as in Visual Studio Code. When you're coding, it tries to interpret your code as you're writing it, but it doesn't get it 100% right every time. So as soon as you write device is equal to something, it tries to interpret it what it's going to be, but that's a guess. That's not a 100% final thing. The sure answer is after you run it, after the code executes line by line, then it knows for sure what's the value in it. So the hovering thing, this is only for after you have click run. You can't really be sure what does anything mean before running it. So you would run it and then you can check when you're debugging your code, you need to go back to see something, then you can hover and see what was stored in each variable. So after that, in this uh, line, in this code block, what I'm storing is device, model, then cost, some specifications. And if you look at the specifications, I'm storing them with this bracket. Do you see that bracket there? Do you want me to
Yeah.
zoom?
Yep, can see it.
Okay, you can see it. So with this bracket, I'm separating some strings with a comma and I'm storing them there. Can you write something like this in your compiler and see what's the type of this variable?
Give me 1 second.
And you don't need to write a full sentence. You can just write three words
Tuple,
like
tuple,
white, black,
whatever.
something. So
It's
what
saying
did you
tuple
get?
or tuple. Tuple,
Tuple.
tuple, I
Okay,
guess.
great, great. Did everybody get the same type from it?
I am writing right now.
What about Idu and Salman? Did you guys run it?
I was still writing. Give me a second. Let me see here.
Take your time. Take your time, it's fine.
Um, okay, I'm hovering over the son of a bitch, but it's not showing.
Don't hover. Use the way we did previously, writing type and then writing the name of the variable and running the block.
I get tuple.
Same.
Perfect. Now, can you guys copy paste the same line into the next line, change the name of the variable, and change the type of the brackets, both at the beginning and at the end?
List.
Same.
Perfect.
Same.
So just by changing the brackets, you saw that we have two different data types. The one with these regular brackets or parentheses is a tuple versus the one with the square brackets is a list. Can anybody take a guess what would be the difference between a tuple and a list?
List, I imagine it's a container of
Okay,
some variables.
okay.
Uh, a tuple, I don't know. I don't know the name. Sorry.
A tuple is basically they are both very, very, very similar. There's just one difference between them. You saw here that you're storing variables the same way in both of them. So it means they can both be used to store any type of variables. You can store strings in them, you can store numbers, floats, whatever you want. You can create basically kind of lists using both of them. There's only one difference. Can anybody else take a guess? What would be the difference? Okay, before I make you take a guess, let's do something. Let's create another code block and access them element by element. So my first variable is called specifications. If I write specifications, square bracket 0 and print it, it gives me the first element. Okay, in Python, the indexing always starts from 0. When you're counting the place of anything in a list or in a matrix, in an array, anywhere, your first element is always element number 0. Then it's 1, 2, 3, and it goes onwards. So the counting always starts from 0 in Python instead of 1. All right? So the element 0 is white. What happens if I change this 0 to, let's say, 1? What would be the answer that I would be getting by running this code block?
Black.
Exactly. And onwards. Now, instead of specifications, if I took other specifications and do the same thing, indexing or accessing value of any element always happens with square brackets. You will always, whenever you're trying to read the value or access the value or change the value of any variable in a list or a tuple, you will always use square brackets for accessing them. So this is very similar in a list to tuple. To access the first element in a tuple, I did name of the variable square bracket 0 inside, and the same thing applies to a list. In a list also, I did the same thing to access it. Okay, let's do something else. I write specifications 0 equals orange. Sorry, my spellings are bad. And then I print it. Print specifications 0. Or I print the whole list. I print specifications fully, maybe. What happens there?
You have an element that is not on your list.
Yeah, that is not defined, so
Yeah,
yourself
but
as
I'm
a
trying
method.
to change it. I'm trying to assign the value orange instead of white. I want this list, this tuple to be updated, and instead of white, as first element, have orange. I want this to be orange, black, midnight blue, another invented obscure color or whatever. So why it's not doing that? What's the thing it's saying in this?
Basically, you can't change the value once assigned.
Absolutely. The the error here, by always read your errors. This is how to read and interpret what the program is telling us not to be able to do. This error is saying tuple object does not support item assignment. Item assignment means doing this. Item assignment, this is an item, orange. I'm trying to assign it to the first element of a tuple. And it's saying tuple object does not support item assignment.
Oh, because it cannot go in the square bracket.
It cannot, that's the, okay, what happens if we try to do this for the list instead of tuple? If I
Uh,
take other specifications instead of specifications, sorry, other specifications instead of specification, I assign orange to it, and then I print the other list. What happened there?
It works.
It works. And that's basically the difference between list and tuple. They are both lists of values, but tuple, you can only create it, you cannot change the elements after creating a tuple. Versus a list, you can update it, modify it, delete the elements from it, add new elements to it, change what was written there before in a list. So because of that reason, tuples are more memory efficient. So whenever you need to create a variable or a list in your code that only needs to be created once and does not need to be changed throughout your code, you can use tuples to make your code more memory efficient. But when you need to create some variables in the form of a list that need to be changed during the execution of your code, you can use lists for that. Is that clear now?
Yes.
yes.
Make sense? So the way we change elements is exactly what we did here. We specified what element we are trying to change, and after the equality, we wrote what new value we are trying to give to this particular element in a list. All right?
Mhm.
Okay. So the common data types that you will probably use in your projects are strings, integers, floats, lists, tuples. Range, we will discuss it later. Okay? Dictionaries also, we will discuss them later, but the most common for now that you will be using will be strings, integers, floats, lists, and tuples. Any questions about any of these data types so far?
No.
Okay. How can we perform arithmetic operations on our code? Simply the way we perform it in MATLAB or in a calculator. We just, if we want to perform an addition, we just do x plus y. If we want to perform a subtraction, we do x minus y. So simply by writing the operators, and these are some of the common arithmetic operators that you can use: plus, minus, multiply, divide, modulus, exponential, and floor division. Floor division, you won't really be using it a lot. Same goes for maybe modulus and exponentials. Modulus, can anybody tell me what's a modulus?
A percentage?
No, unfortunately, no.
Remainder.
Remainder, yes. Remainder, what's a remainder? If I divide 10 by 3, what's the remainder?
1.
Yes, because 3 threes are 9, and remainder is 1 there. Is that clear to everybody? I hope it's clear to everybody. So this percentage sign is used for calculating remainders. It's very useful for things like finding even numbers or odd numbers. You divide something by 2, if the remainder is 0, the number is even. Otherwise, I won't give away too much information about this. Okay. Last time we discussed conditionals, breaking down your code into different branches. If this, then this, otherwise that. And we discussed another important element, which was loops, when we need to take some steps a certain number of times, right? How can we combine them to create a bigger knowledge base for us now, to complicate our codes further? Let's say we create two variables. A is equal to 200, B is equal to 33. And we want to print different statements based on their comparison. If B is greater than A, then print something. Else if. Now, else if can be used to create as many branches in your code as you want. Can you guys mute yourself? Okay, so else if can be used to create as many branches in your code as you want. And the way this executes is line by line. First, the value 200 is stored in A, the value 33 is stored in B. The code comes here at line 3 and checks if B is greater than A. Is it true right now or no?
Sorry, could you repeat it, please?
Line number 3, if B is greater than A. Is this statement true right now or no? Does it hold or no?
No.
No.
No. So since it does not hold, line 4 does not get executed, because line 4 only gets executed if line 3, this condition is true. Whatever is written 4 spaces forward from this block only gets executed if the condition here is true. So line 4 does not get executed. What's the next line? Line 5. Else if A equals B. Is this true?
Nope.
No.
No.
So will this line get executed? Line 6.
Nope.
No. The next one is else, and it doesn't have any condition. This is sort of the default option. Like if this is not true, that is not true, nothing in your conditions applies, then you can write your default condition here. Like if nothing else is applicable, then do this. Will this line get executed?
Yes.
So if I run this code block, what would be my output?
Will it will be print A is greater than B.
Absolutely. It prints A is greater than B. Go ahead, experiment with that in your terminal, in your Colab. Write some variables, write some conditions, and practice. You will see once you write a condition here and press enter, it will automatically create this space. And whatever code you write here will only get executed if it's written or at the right indentation level. In Python, this is something very important. If you write this at the wrong indentation level, it shows you an error right away that your code block is at a wrong indentation level. You see a red line under it, and if you hover over it, it says expected indented block. Indented block means it expected it to be at one tab level. So the way any loops, any conditionals work in Python, any functions work in Python is that after the main condition, everything that's being executed inside that is at one indent level. Now, if I write another if statement under it, and you can nest conditions inside other conditions. For example, before you go to your terminal, I'll just show you an example here. Since there was this thing going on here, which was an else condition, I want to write something else inside it. Like, let's say I want to write another if statement here, since we know the code is going to come here. So we write if a modulus 2 equals 0, and it automatically takes me to a further indent level. And I print a, or like the variable a is an even number. Will this line get executed or no?
No,
Why not?
You didn't specify the other condition.
I don't have to. If I
like
don't have
A.
any other condition, for example, an if statement is complete by itself here. If I don't want to write else if or else, I can write it as is. When I want to branch out my code in a way that I want to say that, okay, execute this statement only if this is true, and I don't have to specify else or anything else in that. I can just keep writing a normal code after this. For example, if I want to get out of this block, I just go now all the way out and I say print this line gets executed after all the if blocks, and I run this. This is the output of my code. Read again line by line. Line 1 gets executed, line 2 gets executed, condition 3 is not true, so 4 doesn't get executed. Same goes for 5. But 7 is true, so 8 gets executed. And we stay inside this until, we have something that gets us out of this indent level. So line 8 gets executed. What about line 9? If a modulus 2 is equal to 0, which basically means that if we divide a by 2, if the remainder is 0, right? So if you divide 200 by 2, the remainder is 0. This statement becomes true, right? So because of this, line 10 gets executed, which is print the variable a is an even number, and it gets executed there. After this, line 11 gets executed because we are now out of all the if-else blocks and we are at 0 indent level again. So it says this line gets executed after all the if blocks. Make sense?
I suck at math, but yes,
Yes.
Any questions so far?
No.
not really.
Okay. Do you want to go and write this down in your terminal? I can I can copy the code in chat, but it won't preserve the indentation, I guess, so you might have to put tabs manually. So I will paste this in chat for you to copy. It may not preserve the indentation, so be careful when you paste it in your code block.
It did keep the indentation.
Perfect. So if you execute it, do you get the same output as me?
Yes.
Perfect. I'll let everybody else run it before coming back to the code. Let me know when you finish running the code.
Yep.
Perfect. What about you, Shane?
Oh, I was mute. It's working.
Perfect. All right, so let's try some loops now. Remember we created a variable called specifications and we stored some values in it? The values were something like white, black, midnight blue, or something, something, something. It was a tuple. If we want to print everything in it line by line, which means we are accessing it element by element. And what do I mean by element? Element means each individual value that we stored in a list or a tuple. The same thing works. From now on, whenever I refer to list or tuple, I mean both of them because you know the difference now between them, that tuple is not editable after creation, list is editable. So in every other regard, they are essentially the same. So if I say list, I mean both list and tuple and vice versa. So if I want to access them element by element and I want to print them, I write for item in specifications. What I mean by item in specifications is that for each item in the tuple or the list called specifications. Make sense? Do you understand the meaning of the word in here? It's just like in when we say in English language, when I say for coffee in cup, or when I say for each penny in your wallet. So it means each of the pennies, you know? So it's like it conveys the same meaning here. Just like when I say for each penny in your wallet, it applies to all of them. Same thing applies here to the list or tuple here for each element. And for elements, we are creating here a new variable called item. We can make this anything. We can say for X in specifications or for I in specifications, for anything, for thing in specification. Because this is a name we are giving to each element when it's going to be executed in a loop. That's all right, Zara. I hope you didn't miss a lot. I will upload this class later for everybody who missed it, so you can see the part you missed and you can practice on your own. So right now we're discussing loops and I'm explaining how we created a variable. Just for you, I'm gonna go back and show you what's this variable, specifications. Here we created a variable called specifications and we stored some values in it. This is a tuple and the other variable called other specifications is a list. Their difference, you can go back in the video and you can check what was the difference between them, but in summary, tuples are not editable, lists are editable. Other than that, they're essentially the same. So now I want to access each element in the list or tuple. So when I come in the loop and I say for item in specification, print item. So whatever variable you created, go ahead, write this loop for that particular variable and see if you get the same output, if it prints each element in a line. After you execute the code, please let me know that you've executed it and it gives you the same or the expected output, depending on whatever variable you created.
It worked.
It worked?
Yep. I get Bob and she.
You named everything Bob again.
Yes. I mean, what do you think?
That's my husband for you, everybody. That's the reason he lost his naming rights.
No, no, that's the reason she married me.
Nope, definitely not. He lost his naming rights when he named all the chicken in a video game he was playing Bob. So when you name something Bob, you lose naming rights, your future naming rights to anything. You don't get to name anything in future.
Not even a variable.
Not even a variable.
Oh, boy.
Too late. My variable is called Bob, and you're in the other room, so you cannot come and change it.
I'm gonna have to do something about it. I'll figure something out. So everybody executed their codes?
Yeah, it's what.
Yep.
Perfect. Let's go to the next for loop. For item in other specifications. The only difference here is before printing item, I'm using this plus sign and I'm adding a string here. Now, since they have the same data type, item is also a string, and this thing that I'm adding to it, other specification is also inside this inverted comma. They can be added together. If I had an integer here, I couldn't use this plus sign to add them because a string cannot be added to an integer. Same goes for mixing other data types. So as long as you have same data types, you can use these operators on them. Well, there are certain exceptions. You can mix and match integers and floats a lot of times, but it's a safer practice to always use the same data types intentionally. If you want to work with floats, use floats. If you want to work with integers, use integers. Because sometimes the auto conversion of integer to float does not work as you expected it. Anyways, the point here is that since this is a string and each element in other specifications is also a string. Zara, are you able to follow the code at this point?
I'm able to understand the logic, but I don't have the exact syntax copied here.
Let me just send you the variables we created so that you can use specifications and other specifications as we have here. So I'm gonna post this in chat. You can copy paste this to create the same variables, and then you can write the same loop.
Okay.
Once everybody has finished running this code block where we are adding a string to another string, let me know that you've run it and there are no errors.
Already did.
Done. Perfect.
I have an error, but I think it's because I'm doing like typing error.
Can you type exactly what you typed in chat and I'll take a look at it? Can you copy paste your code in the chat? For
Uh,
item in other specifications, print other specifications plus item. You have a spelling thing.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that dyslexia.
That's all
This
right.
just proves
I
your
was
naming
still
rights.
getting the error still after that.
What's the error? Can you read the error to me?
Name author specification is not defined.
Name, oh, okay. The other specification variable is not defined. You haven't created a variable called other specifications. So write the name you created. I think you created a list called Bob or something.
Yeah, and I
Whatever
did.
list you created, use that name instead of other specification.
Vincent, what did you do?
I mean, I did my list author specification, and that's what I'm copying right now.
Does your other specification have this underscore exactly as is?
Yes.
Then go back, run that code block again where you created other specification, because right now the code is saying that it doesn't exist. So you have to run it again, then come back and run this block when it exists.
I guess it. Oh, now it worked.
Perfect. So does it work for everybody?
Yep.
Perfect.
Done.
That's great. What we did here is we added two strings together, but we only added them using one line. We said other specification is, we wrote this once, but how many times did it get written on the terminal?
For me, 3.
3, because you had 3 objects in your list called other specifications. So the code runs, the number of times the number of times this line gets executed will be the same as number of elements in your list. Make sense? Because this is a loop. It's called a for loop. So for, and then the rest of the statement specifies how many times the next line will get executed. So since we said here item in other specifications, now item is a counter, you can say, which goes to each element one by one in your list called other specifications. So other specifications, I'm going to keep hovering over it so you can see my list here. The first element is orange. So the first time this code gets executed, it goes to the value orange, which means the first time this line number 2 gets executed, what's the value in item? Item becomes a variable. The loop index becomes always a variable. So item right now is orange. Make sense?
Yes.
The second time line number 2 gets executed, what's the value in item?
No home button.
Exactly. And the third time it is?
Works with Apple Pencil too.
So basically we have different strings that keep becoming the value of this item as we move from element to element in our list. And our addition works perfectly because we have one string being added to another string every time this code gets executed. Make sense? Any questions about this for loop so far?
All
Hi,
good on my end.
Sorry, what?
Sorry, yeah. So I just joined actually,
Hi, Essen, how are
and
you?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm good too, thanks.
First of all, thanks for these classes. It's really helping.
My
I
pleasure.
couldn't join the first class as well, but I looked at the video on YouTube and understood that part very well. So
Perfect.
I have some like very basic background of coding, and I have a question for example, like in other languages. For example, I use MATLAB a lot.
Okay,
So in that, if I use a for loop,
yeah,
for example, I want to encounter only the odd items or
yeah.
something. Is it possible in here? Because I don't see the item. I mean, here it says that print other specification is plus item, not item or with, for example, I or J or something like that. So can you?
Okay, so the difference between MATLAB for loop and this for loop is that MATLAB has its own implicit counting index, versus here, the variable item is the loop index. So since you have a bit of programming background, you understand what a loop index is, right?
Yes.
So loop index here is not 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in this Python for loop, since we created it in a way where we made our loop index explicitly declared item is the loop index. That's why when we are saying for item in other specifications, this item becomes each element in my list when it's running. We can create loops with implicit indicators or without any lists here. For example, if I just want to run a for loop 10 times, we can do that. And we will see that right in the next example below that you see on your screen here. So we can, of course, do even odd numbers, we can do steps, we can do anything we want, just like MATLAB in Python as well. We will see that just in a few minutes.
All right. All right. Thank you.
My pleasure. Any other questions, anybody? Is for loop clear to everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Now moving on to right now, we created a loop over an existing list. What if we don't have a list and we just want to run some particular command 10 times? What do we do there? We can create a for loop based on simple counting. And to write a for loop based on simple counting, we use a built-in Python object called range. Range is a built-in Python object which gives us a certain iterable number. Iterable, what do I mean by iterable? Iterable means something you can iterate over, something you can loop over. So this is an object that can be used in loops. So if I say for item in range 11, range always starts, if we write it without any explicit steps or starting point or end point, by default, if we just give it an end point, then it always starts from 0 and goes to that endpoint minus 1. Because remember, counting always starts from 0 in Python. So in this case, range goes from 0 to 10. So if I write this one, go ahead, write that in your collabs, and you will just, in this code, you will learn another important concept about how to print stuff. Go ahead, first write this code in your editors, run it, let me know you got the same output, and then I will explain what we just did. You have to say it when you've done it.
Done.
Perfect.
Done.
Perfect.
Done.
So everybody finished?
Yes.
If you don't have any background noise, you guys can keep your mics open. I don't mind. So you don't have to, go back and forth turning your mic on and off.
Yes. Sorry, I was typing.
Okay, so what we just did in this code, I will explain it word by word. For item in range 11, that means that this for loop will run from 0 to 10 because range is an object that has multiple forms. Now, if you hover over range, you have this tooltip that's explaining what range does. If you give it a single number, that's a stopping number. So it tells us where to stop. It always starts from 0 in that case and just stops at that particular number. There's another format of using range, and that's the second line where it says in the tooltip range, start, stop, and optionally a step. We will see that syntax later when we are doing more advanced loops, but you can give a specific starting point, a specific stopping point, and a step. What do we mean by step in programming? It means instead of going from 0 to 1, I can make it go from 0 to 5, from 5 to 10, 10 to 15. So it will only run for 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, something like that, which means it has a step of 5. We can make it run for specific steps. So if we need an index in which I need to print on my terminal 5, 10, 15, 20, something like that, we can do it using range object here. So range works in two ways. If we just give it one number, that's a stopping number with the default step size of 1, and it goes from 0 until that stopping point minus 1. So writing 11 means it runs from 0 to 10, which you just saw on your terminal that it's printing this statement. The value stored in item right now is and then in where we have this curly bracket, this is another way of printing something on terminal. We could not simply do here other specification is plus item. Can anybody tell me why we could not do just that? If I do this,
I think one is a string and the other one is a numerical value.
absolutely. Just for everybody else, I'm gonna do this. I will comment out the line I have. To comment something, you can press Control and forward slash, or you can just manually write a hash symbol in front of it in Python. So this one gave me an error. Knowing how to read errors is very important. Here it says can only concatenate string, not integer to string. What's this error telling us? It's saying that this part of your code cannot be concatenated or added to this part because this part is a string, and whatever value you have in this item at the moment is an integer. It's not a string. You can only add strings to strings and integers to integers. So that's why we are not printing it like this. We are printing it in another format, which is the one below. What we do is when we want to write integer or float values or changing variables in Python, we put a placeholder for it where we want that variable to be. So this is a string, 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 string. Here I want to put a variable which will change every time this code is printing something. So I put these curly brackets there. Curly brackets are a placeholder for numbers, for variables. So I put this placeholder, then I use dot format, and inside it I put my variable. So this variable will be printed here in place of the curly brackets every time this code gets executed. Is that clear to everybody?
Yes.
Make sense? If I
Yes.
change the place of these curly brackets, for example, this will just make it very weird, but if I just write the value stored and then here I put the curly brackets, it will print it like this. The value stored, and then in place of curly brackets, we get our numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then the rest of the sentence. So it's basically up to us to make sense of where we want to place our variables. Make sense?
Yes. What if we have like two different values and we have to, how do you place these together? I mean,
Okay, so we can say value 1 here, and then we can say and we want to print another value, and we say value 2. And let's say value 2 is either another variable or it's a variation of the first variable, whatever we have. We can say format, and here we can explicitly, then when we have multiple variables, we will explicitly specify value 1. I think I have a spelling mistake here. I wanted to put it exactly the same. So value
sorry, we are
1
missing
is
your
equal to
screen.
item. Oh, you're missing my screen. Give me a sec. I'll write it and then I will zoom it for you so you can see it. You can see my screen up to this, I guess. Sorry. My zoom it is not working, I guess. Give me 1 second. Should be working now. Are you able to see how I put format now? Value
Yep.
1 is equal to item, comma, value 2 is equal to the name of the second variable or the first variable plus some operation, anything I want to print here. but it has to be in my loop index, or it has to be available at that time, you know? It has to be there, it has to exist, whatever I want to print here. It can be a second loop variable, it can be result of a calculation I did inside the loop, anything that exists at that time. Can you copy this and then I'll go back to the screen and run it. Or if you want, I can just write it in the chat. Do you want me to copy this into the chat?
Yes, please.
Okay. This complete block is in your chat now.
Thank you.
Does this code make sense? We are printing two different values now. We name them explicitly inside our brackets, and then later in the format, we specified value 1 is this, value 2 is something else. Asan, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Did everybody run the code and get the same output?
Yes.
Yep.
Great, time for an exercise. Do you like exercise?
No.
Yes.
As
Either,
long as it doesn't involve me moving.
either you're the odd one out. I hate exercises.
What
Okay.
can I say? I'm weird that way.
So you have to write a code that has the following output. I'll give you 5-6 minutes to do this. It shouldn't be very difficult. Take your time. You can discuss with each other. Uh, it's a team effort, so feel free to discuss with each other. I won't give any feedback right now, right away. I'll mute myself. Discuss with each other, write the code. You can share your code with each other in the chat if you want, and let's see how it goes. Do you wanna cheat?
I'm gonna make you your favorite dinner.
Vincent, I'm gonna go there and slap you.
The term item, I don't understand what that is.
Item is a loop index. So item, to understand item, we go back to this code. When I say for item in range 11, print something, 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 and value 1, I'm giving it to item. Like I'm assigning item to value 1, which means this number here is an item. The first time loop runs, item is 0. The second time loop runs, item is 1. Next time it's 2, and so forth. Do you have any experience in C++?
No, I don't
Or even in
actually.
MATLAB, like for when you write a loop in MATLAB, how do you write it? For I is equal to 0, I is equal to I plus 1 or something, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
this is I. This is your I in MATLAB.
Okay,
Make sense?
okay. Yes, it makes sense.
As a base point in this loop, we have this number every time this code runs, right?
Yes.
So it is this number we are trying to see if it's an even number or not, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So pay attention to how I'm saying it. We are trying to see if item is even. Coding is simply a translation from English to Python. Just like you say something in English and you can translate it to Urdu or French or any other language, whatever you say in English, you can translate it to Python as well. So when I say if item is even, how do I translate that to Python? If item is even. We have some inspiration for that here. If item modulus 2 equals 0. How do we check if a number is even or odd? We divide it by 2 and we see the remainder. If the remainder is 0, the item is even. If the remainder is not 0, the item is odd, right? So if I say if item is even, the translation of that into from English to Python is if item modulus 2 equals 0. Make sense so far?
Yes.
So when I'm writing my code here, for now I only have one thing that's changing in my loop. The number 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? What do I want in my final version? How many things are changing in my final version? There's one thing which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's another thing that's changing.
Even or
Even,
odd.
odd, even, odd. So it means in the loop, there's one thing that's changing, there's another thing that's changing. And for changing things, what do? We store them in a variable, right?
Yeah.
So what you can do here, first thing first, you wrote a loop that makes it run 10 times. The second thing you can do is create a variable and store even or odd in it, depending on if item is even or odd. So on your second line, I'm going to write it in English. You will translate it into code. If item is even, the second variable, I'm going to call it value2. Value2 is equal to even. Otherwise, value2, sorry, I changed my variable name. Value2 is equal to odd. So I wrote it in English. You're going to translate it into Python. Does that make sense, Essen?
Yes.
What about you, Edu and Vincent? Does it make sense?
It makes sense. I'm just trying to get there. Like
You'll get there. Don't worry, you'll get there.
the only thing that's blocking me is how I define the value too. That's the only thing.
How do you define the value2? So for that, you see, here we said A is equal to 200, right?
Yes.
I could have said value2 is equal to even, right?
Yeah.
And if I do this inside certain condition, does that make sense? For example, instead of writing it here, if I do it inside this particular condition. And if in the other condition I give it another value, does that make any sense? So then let's go to the exercise. I'll just quickly show you what's the exercise for you guys next week. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. This is your exercise.
Ooh, this looks scary.
It's very easy. All the variables that we created so far cannot create games like die roll. For example, I want to say that I want to roll a die and get a random number as an output. So this is one element that I'm going to give you for this exercise, how to create random numbers in Python. The way to do it is we import a module called random. From this module, we import a function or a method called random range. So this line, from random import random range, these are built-in Python modules and functions that we can use. So we import this and then we just run it. Random range, when you hover over it after running it, can give you the same thing. Start, stop, step. So you can read the description, you can click on view source, or you can just Google module, random module in Python to see the description of it, how to use it. Using that random module, this is the task you will do. I will share the link. Well, the link to this notebook is already available in my website. The original post that says Python course session 1 or something, you got an email with it. If you go to the original post, I modified it to include the links to the GitHub repository and to this particular notebook. So you will find the link there, and from that link you can also use this resource. So your assignment basically is create a multiplayer game, player 1, player 2, player 3, maybe 3-player game. Each player rolls a die 10 times. So basically generates a random number 10 times, but each time you need to keep track of what number did they get. The player with most odd number of die rolls wins. In case of a tie, roll again until we have a winner. So in real life, if it's 3 players, you all roll a die 10 times and the player with most odd number die rolls out of the 10 die rolls wins the game. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you guys think you can make it? It's a collaborative homework, so you are allowed to collaborate with each other and in the end submit one game. So work with each other, make a WhatsApp group, discuss with each other. You have a week to do it, and let's see what solutions you come up with. Sounds good?
Sounds good.
Yes.
Awesome. See you all
So
next
this
week. Does
task,
the same time
so
work
this
for
task was
everybody? Like the time Saturdays in Montreal in Eastern Standard Time, Saturdays 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. Basically the time that was for our first lecture. Does that work for everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so there's going to
Yes.
be no new link. The same link next week will work for the same class. No time changes. I'm so sorry for the time confusion this week. Hopefully, from now on, we will have better communication. So, see you all next week.
See you next week.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye.